The bright studio lights bathed the stage in a golden glow, reflecting off the polished floors and the eager faces in the live audience. Cameras clicked, microphones adjusted, and the hum of anticipation filled the air. Millions of viewers were glued to their screens at home, unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would be etched into talk show history forever. Jonathan Roumie walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. His steps were deliberate, his presence calm yet commanding. Unlike most guests, he didn't flash a smile or wave extravagantly. He didn't need to. The energy around him shifted the moment he entered the studio. There was a subtle intensity in his eyes, a focus that suggested he was about to say something no one would forget. Across the stage, Oprah Winfrey, the queen of live television, sat poised in her signature armchair, her gaze sharp yet welcoming. Millions had tuned in expecting her to guide the conversation with her usual warmth, charm, and practiced wit. She had hosted hundreds of guests before, from celebrities to world leaders, and she had seen almost everything. But there was a flicker in her expression as she looked at Jonathan, a mix of curiosity, respect, and anticipation. Jonathan's voice, when it finally spoke, was calm but resonant, cutting through the subtle murmurs in the audience. "Thank you for having me here," he began. There was no hesitation, no nervousness. Just a steady rhythm, each word deliberate, each sentence layered with meaning. As he spoke, the words seemed to carry a weight far beyond the walls of the studio. Oprah leaned forward, smiling politely, expecting a safe, inspirational answer to her first question. But Jonathan's words didn't go the way she expected. He didn't chase applause or approval. Instead, he spoke truth with a clarity that was rare on live television. He addressed a topic most people avoided, one that touched the very core of faith, courage, and the human spirit. The audience felt it instantly. There was a tension in the room, almost electric, as everyone realized this wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was something deeper. Something transformative. The camera captured the subtle reactions, a gasp here, a quiet whisper there, and the audience leaning forward in their seats. Even the production crew paused for a moment, caught in the gravity of what was happening. Jonathan's words didn't scream for attention. They commanded it. He spoke with sincerity that couldn't be ignored. And as he continued, the atmosphere changed. The usual chatter, the polite smiles, even Oprah's confident presence, all of it gave way to silence. The live audience went quiet. The viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Every eye in the studio was fixed on Jonathan. It was the kind of silence that precedes a revelation, the kind that makes you hold your breath because you know you're witnessing something extraordinary. And in that silence, before a single word was fully understood, everyone felt it. This moment was about to change everything. Jonathan Roumie's powerful message had begun. And within seconds, it would silence one of the most iconic voices on television, leaving a live audience, a world watching, and even Oprah herself completely stunned. The studio lights glimmered, reflecting off the polished surfaces, but it wasn't just the physical brightness that filled the space. There was a palpable energy, almost like electricity, running through the air. The audience, both in studio and at home, felt it. They didn't yet know why, but they could sense that this wasn't going to be an ordinary episode of a talk show. Something remarkable was about to unfold. Jonathan Roumie had been invited for what was described as a simple discussion, an exploration of faith, life lessons, and personal experiences. But anyone familiar with Jonathan knew better. Calm, introspective, yet confident, he carried a presence that demanded attention without ever trying to take it. He didn't speak for validation, he spoke for truth. Backstage, assistants whispered among themselves, checking notes and teleprompters. Producers exchanged glances, unsure how to handle the palpable tension growing with each passing second. Meanwhile, the audience settled into their seats, chatting softly, unaware of the quiet storm about to hit. On stage, the familiar backdrop of soft blues and warm lighting set the tone, a stage meticulously designed to comfort viewers and focus attention on the conversation. But that comfort, as it would soon be, would be shattered. Oprah Winfrey, seated with her signature poise, had been hosting live shows for decades. She knew how to read people, anticipate answers, and guide conversations. She smiled politely, her posture straight, her hands resting elegantly in her lap. Millions at home expected her to navigate the discussion, steer it with charm and empathy, and ensure it remained entertaining. That was her forte. She was prepared for every possible scenario, or so she thought. Jonathan, on the other hand, approached the stage not with grand gestures or flashy movements, but with quiet dignity. His demeanor immediately contrasted the typical energy of celebrity guests. No exaggerated expressions, no nervous glances, just a steady gaze, a slight nod to acknowledge the host and audience, and the calm confidence of someone who had walked through challenges far greater than anything the cameras could capture. As he sat down opposite Oprah, the studio felt different. The usual hum of cameras and crew quieted slightly. Even the lights seemed softer, focused not just on the faces of the host and guest, but on the gravity of what was about to be said. Jonathan's first words were simple, yet they carried an unshakable weight. They weren't crafted for applause or sensationalism. They were deliberate, precise, and profound. The audience, initially relaxed and chatty, leaned in. Some furrowed their brows, sensing that this conversation would transcend the ordinary. Others exchanged glances, trying to gauge the tone of the discussion. The energy shifted from casual curiosity to tense anticipation. Even Oprah's practiced smile held a subtle edge of curiosity, a recognition that Jonathan's words might challenge not just her, but the entire room. Jonathan didn't rush. He didn't over-explain. He let the silence linger for a moment, allowing the weight of his presence to sink in. Then, he began speaking, and every word resonated with clarity and intent. He didn't need theatrics. He didn't need loud gestures or dramatic pauses. The audience felt the power of truth delivered with calm authority, and that was far more compelling than any staged performance could ever be. Every glance, every subtle nod, every pause Jonathan took amplified the tension. The cameras captured it all, the shifting expressions, the audience leaning forward, the faint murmurs of disbelief. It was a setup not for a typical TV moment, but for a revelation that would leave both the studio and the world stunned. By the time Jonathan finished his initial remarks, the atmosphere had transformed completely. What began as a routine, controlled talk show environment had become a stage charged with expectation, suspense, and the undeniable sense that something unforgettable was about to happen. The stage was set. The audience was ready. And Jonathan Roumie was about to deliver a message that would silence even the most iconic voices in television. The moment Jonathan Roumie began speaking, the studio fell into a hush. Even the smallest noises, a cough, a shuffling foot, the click of a camera, seemed magnified in the silence. The air felt charged, as if everyone in the room collectively realized that this was not a typical conversation. This was something different. Something urgent. Something that demanded attention beyond the surface. Oprah leaned forward, her signature composure intact, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. She had hosted hundreds of powerful personalities, but there was something in Jonathan's presence, calm yet unyielding, that suggested he was about to challenge the very foundation of the discussion. She adjusted her posture slightly, signaling her readiness, but even she couldn't predict the direction of the conversation. Jonathan spoke with deliberate clarity. Each word was measured, each sentence carefully constructed. He addressed not the superficial, pre-written questions of the show, but the deeper truths people often avoided. His voice was steady, resonant, and authoritative, yet there was no arrogance, only sincerity. "We live in a world that often celebrates spectacle over substance," he said, pausing briefly to let the words sink in. "We chase attention, applause, and recognition, yet fail to acknowledge the quiet truths that shape our lives." A subtle murmur spread through the audience. Some leaned forward instinctively, caught by the gravity in his voice. Others exchanged looks of disbelief, unsure if they were witnessing inspiration or confrontation. Cameras panned across faces frozen in anticipation. Even Oprah's practiced smile faded slightly. She had heard moving statements before, but never one delivered with such unshakable conviction, directly addressing a room full of witnesses and viewers alike. Jonathan didn't stop. He spoke of courage, humility, and accountability, framing his words not as judgment, but as reflection. "We often underestimate the power of respect," he continued. "Not respect given for fame, influence, or wealth, but respect given because it is the right thing to do." He locked eyes with Oprah, a gentle intensity that was impossible to ignore. The live audience held their breath. Even the crew backstage paused, captivated by the sincerity and weight of his message. As he continued, the tension in the studio escalated. Whispered exchanges between audience members became almost inaudible. Some fidgeted in their seats, unsure how to react. The energy was no longer casual curiosity, it had transformed into a charged anticipation. Everyone sensed that Jonathan was about to push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and reveal something profoundly personal and unignorable. Oprah, known for her ability to handle difficult conversations, felt a rare moment of pause. Jonathan's words weren't confrontational in the traditional sense. They weren't meant to provoke. Instead, they were unflinchingly honest, striking at the very heart of values, behavior, and authenticity. The usual dynamic of host guiding guest had subtly inverted. Now the guest was leading, and the host, even someone as seasoned as Oprah, had to follow. By the midpoint of the segment, the tension was palpable. Every camera angle, every subtle gesture, every tiny reaction in the audience captured the intensity. Jonathan's words resonated, cutting through distractions, challenging assumptions, and creating a sense of vulnerability in a space usually dominated by controlled narratives. As the studio leaned into silence, Jonathan concluded the first major point of his message with a calm yet piercing statement: "True influence isn't measured by applause. It's measured by the courage to speak truth when no one else will, and the humility to listen when everyone thinks they know the answer." The words hung in the air. Silence dominated the room. Even Oprah, ever poised, felt the weight of what had been said. The conflict was not between two people, but between truth and expectation, between the comfort of pre-written conversation and the challenge of reality. And in that silence, the stage was set for a revelation that would leave the audience, and the world, stunned. The moment Jonathan Roumie's words hung in the air, the studio transformed. Silence swept through the room like a tangible force. The live audience, which had been buzzing with anticipation and subtle chatter, froze mid-breath. Cameras panned across the crowd, capturing faces wide-eyed and mouths slightly ajar, as if struggling to process the weight of what they had just heard. Oprah sat forward, her usual poise intact, but even her composed expression betrayed a flicker of disbelief. She was used to hosting powerful voices, yet nothing had prepared her for the calm authority and raw sincerity Jonathan projected. Her eyes, often so expressive and commanding, were now mirrors of quiet reflection, scanning the audience and subtly measuring the gravity of the moment. Viewers at home felt it too. Millions leaned closer to their screens, some gripping the edges of their chairs. Phones emerged from pockets, not for selfies or casual recording, but to capture a snippet of a moment that felt larger than television, a moment that transcended entertainment. Even seasoned journalists and commentators watching the live feed sensed the unmistakable shift in energy. This was more than an interview. It was a statement that would ripple far beyond the studio walls. Back in the audience, whispers began to spread like wildfire. "Did he really just say that?" one person murmured. Another shook their head in disbelief. Yet, despite the murmurs, the room remained suspended in a fragile stillness, as if everyone instinctively knew that interrupting or reacting too quickly would diminish the impact. Jonathan, calm and composed, observed silently. He didn't need to raise his voice, gesture dramatically, or plead for attention. Every subtle inflection, every carefully chosen pause, magnified the effect of his words. He let the reactions unfold naturally, allowing the audience, and Oprah, to fully absorb the message. The contrast between his quiet authority and the mounting tension made the moment almost electric. Oprah's reaction was particularly striking. Usually quick with responses, she paused, her fingers gently clasped together. Her gaze, focused yet searching, lingered on Jonathan as if trying to understand not just his words, but the depth of their meaning. The live cameras captured the subtle twitch of an eyebrow, the gentle shift of posture, the almost imperceptible nod, signs of recognition that something extraordinary was occurring. The audience, both in studio and at home, collectively leaned forward, drawn into the gravity of the exchange. The murmurs quieted, replaced by a profound stillness, as though the studio itself was holding its breath. In that moment, Jonathan's words didn't just resonate, they commanded attention and respect, leaving an invisible imprint on everyone present. And then, just when the weight of the silence felt overwhelming, Jonathan allowed the pause to linger a fraction longer. The tension was palpable. Viewers sensed that the next words, the next subtle gesture, would tip the balance from suspense into revelation. Every eye, every camera, every subtle movement of the audience hinted that something unforgettable was about to happen. The stage, the audience, and the world watching had been perfectly primed. The reaction to Jonathan's message was complete: awe, silence, and an almost reverential anticipation. The silence in the studio was deafening. Every eye remained fixed on Jonathan Roumie, waiting for him to break it, but he didn't. He simply paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle like a slow-moving tide. The tension in the air was so thick that even the subtle hum of the lighting rigs and the soft whirring of the cameras seemed louder than usual. Oprah Winfrey, ever the master of live television, blinked slowly. Her hands, usually animated in gesture, rested quietly on her lap. Her carefully rehearsed questions and prompts had no effect. Jonathan had subtly inverted the dynamic. He wasn't performing for the cameras or for applause. He was delivering a truth so piercing that it demanded full attention, even from someone as seasoned and confident as Oprah herself. Then came the moment that transformed the conversation from powerful to unforgettable. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his calm eyes locking with Oprah's. There was no theatrics, no sudden movement, just an unwavering sincerity that filled the space between them. And then, he spoke the words that would silence even the most experienced host. Sometimes, the most important messages are the ones people don't want to hear. The ones that challenge the comfort of appearances. The ones that reveal not only the truth about the world but also about ourselves. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Heads tilted, breaths caught in throats. Even the production crew, trained to remain neutral in all scenarios, exchanged wide-eyed glances. The impact was undeniable. Jonathan's message wasn't just spoken, it was felt, reverberating through every corner of the studio and into millions of homes watching live. Oprah's expression shifted imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably. A frown of concentration, a slight tilt of the head, a long pause, signs that she was absorbing something profoundly unexpected. Her voice, usually so quick to interject, remained still. She didn't speak, because at that moment, words were inadequate. She was witnessing not just inspiration, but a mirror held up to her and the world, reflecting truths few had the courage to confront openly. Jonathan continued, his tone calm but unwavering. He spoke of courage, humility, and the silent power of living with integrity, values that often go unnoticed in a world obsessed with spectacle. Every pause he allowed amplified the tension. Every word lingered, weighted with intention. The audience, previously tense with curiosity, now shifted to awe. Some whispered softly, unsure if they should speak. Others held their hands over their mouths, as though any sound would shatter the fragile moment. Even cameras seemed to linger longer on reactions than on Jonathan himself, capturing the shock, reverence, and contemplation of the crowd. Then, the subtle but unmistakable moment occurred. Oprah, the queen of live television, leaned back in her chair, blinking slowly. Her smile, so often quick and practiced, did not return immediately. Instead, there was a pause, a deep intake of breath, a recognition. Jonathan Roumie had spoken with a power and authenticity that silenced one of the most iconic voices on television. Cameras captured the stunned faces of the audience, the gentle nods of realization from crew members, and the reflective gaze of viewers watching from home. It was not just shock, it was reverence, respect, and the awareness that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The room remained still. The weight of Jonathan's words had not lifted. The moment was complete. And in that silence, the world realized, some messages are too powerful to be ignored, and some truths are so profound that even the greatest voices can be left speechless. The studio remained suspended in silence for several moments after Jonathan Roumie's words had fully landed. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from awkwardness or discomfort. It was the silence of reflection, of minds and hearts absorbing a message far deeper than any typical live show conversation. Every face in the audience, every camera angle, and every viewer at home seemed frozen, caught in a rare moment where reality and truth collided on stage. Oprah Winfrey, known for her poise and quick wit, finally exhaled slowly. Her hands unclasped, her shoulders relaxed, and she leaned forward slightly, as if to bridge the distance between the profound insight Jonathan had shared and her own understanding of it. She didn't respond immediately with words, because no words could truly match the depth of what had been spoken. Instead, she allowed a long pause, a space for thought, for reflection, for processing the weight of authenticity and courage that had just been presented to millions of viewers. The live audience began to stir, quietly at first. Soft murmurs emerged, heads nodded in agreement, and whispers of awe spread like wildfire. Some audience members wiped tears from their eyes, others simply sat in stunned silence, holding the moment in their hearts. Phones were still raised, capturing fleeting glimpses, But everyone knew that no camera could truly capture the full power of what had just occurred. Jonathan, calm and collected, gave a gentle nod to Oprah, acknowledging her presence, her attention, and her role in the unfolding of this moment. He didn't seek applause. He didn't seek validation. The impact of his message was already clear. The resonance was quiet but unshakable. It was the kind of power that needed no demonstration. Oprah finally spoke, her voice measured and reflective. "Jonathan, that was extraordinary," she said. There was a sincerity in her tone that few had heard before. "You didn't just share a message. You reminded all of us, viewers, guests, and hosts alike, what it means to speak from truth and humility." I needed to hear that. The audience erupted into a soft but genuine round of applause. Not the loud, performative clapping of entertainment, but the heartfelt acknowledgement of a lesson well delivered. People were moved, visibly impacted, and deeply inspired. Jonathan's calm presence had transformed the energy in the studio from tension and suspense to reverence and reflection. Backstage, producers and crew exchanged looks of amazement. Some whispered quietly to one another, noting that in all their years of live television, they had rarely witnessed such an unfiltered, unpretentious display of courage and authenticity. This wasn't about ratings or hype, it was about truth speaking louder than any script, cameras, or applause could amplify. Jonathan concluded with a simple, grounding statement: "The greatest power is not in being seen or heard. It is in the courage to speak truthfully, the humility to listen, and the commitment to live with integrity every single day." As he rose to leave the stage, the audience, crew, and Oprah remained still for a heartbeat longer. Then came the applause, not just polite recognition, but a release of collective respect and understanding. People were no longer just watching. They were feeling, connecting, and internalizing the lessons of courage, humility, and silent influence that Jonathan had so powerfully conveyed. The segment ended, but its impact lingered. Viewers at home replayed the moment, discussed it online, and carried its message with them. The show had become more than entertainment. It had become a catalyst for reflection, dialogue, and inspiration. The resolution wasn't just in applause or recognition. It was in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the quiet, undeniable force of a message delivered with sincerity and conviction. As the final applause echoed through the studio, Jonathan Roumie stood quietly, absorbing the energy that his words had created. There was no rush to bask in the moment, no attempt to claim the spotlight. Instead, he simply allowed the truth he had shared to resonate. The stage lights, the cameras, the millions watching at home, all were silent witnesses to a lesson that transcended entertainment. This was a moment that would linger far longer than any applause. The moral of what had unfolded was clear. True influence is never about spectacle, popularity, or fleeting recognition. It is measured by the courage to speak truth, the humility to respect others, and the quiet conviction to live authentically, even when no one is watching. Jonathan's message wasn't loud or forceful, it was subtle, yet profoundly impactful. He had reminded everyone present, the audience, Oprah, the crew, and viewers at home, that words grounded in truth and integrity carry a power that cannot be ignored. Oprah, usually a master of controlling the flow of live conversation, now sat with a reflective expression. Her iconic smile had softened into one of recognition, as if acknowledging that she too had learned something invaluable. She had witnessed firsthand the transformative effect of authenticity, and even she, a voice of immense influence, had been humbled by it. This was the rare kind of television moment where the host becomes a learner, and the guest becomes a teacher. The audience began to rise, not in frenzied celebration, but in respectful acknowledgement. Heads nodded, whispers of agreement filled the studio, and a quiet murmur of understanding spread through the crowd. People weren't just reacting to the words they had heard, they were internalizing a lesson about courage, respect, and silent strength. Phones recorded the moment, but no recording could truly capture the emotional gravity or the ripple effect of the message that had just unfolded. Jonathan took a final breath and addressed the viewers directly, his voice calm and deliberate. Respect isn't something you show only when it benefits you. It's something you give because it is right, because it reflects the character you wish to cultivate within yourself. One day, the person you underestimate might be the very one who shapes your world. The simplicity of the statement carried immense weight. There were no flashy gestures, no dramatic pauses designed for effect. Just truth delivered with integrity. The moral was unmistakable. Humility and courage are not merely virtues, They are the foundation of influence and the pillars of respect. As the cameras slowly pulled back, capturing the entire studio, the final moments lingered on faces filled with awe, reflection, and newfound inspiration. The crew, the audience, and viewers alike understood that they had witnessed more than a live television segment. They had witnessed a moment that challenged assumptions, shifted perspectives, and sparked meaningful contemplation. Jonathan walked off the stage quietly, leaving behind an imprint far louder than any speech, applause, or commentary could convey. The message would continue to travel beyond the studio walls, shared in conversations, replayed in memories, and carried as guidance for anyone seeking courage, authenticity, and true respect. The takeaway was simple, yet powerful. True power is silent. True respect is earned. True courage is unwavering. And in a world that often confuses loudness for influence, Jonathan Roumie had demonstrated that authenticity, humility, and conviction can silence even the most iconic voices and leave a lasting impact on generations. For viewers, the lesson was personal. Type "respect" in the comments if you believe in the strength of humility. Share where you're watching from, and let us celebrate the quiet power of truth together. Because moments like these remind us that the greatest lessons are often delivered in silence, through courage, and with unwavering integrity.